Welcome to Masters of Self University podcast, your highest source of sacred truths and universal wisdom. Hello, beautiful souls. I'm Rachel Fiori, mystic, spiritual teacher, psychic healer, and founder of Masters of Self University. Join our journey of soul transformation as we deep dive into this latest episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Masters of Self University podcast. I'm your host, Ellie Lee.
And I'm your host, Danny Morley. And today we're going to be talking about what it's like to spend time with people who are at a higher level of conscious than you and a lower level of consciousness than you, and what that's like and what it brings up. And before we get into that, something that I want to make clear is that, and I know I can probably speak for, Ellie when I say this, but we are still in the process of healing our inferior and superiority programs. We are not at a place of really fully embodied the way of equality, which is, what we're speaking about here. If you don't know what we're talking about the ways of oneness, taught by Rachel Fiori. So the way of equality is to really energetically arrive at that place of seeing everyone as equal. And when we're not there is when we're running programs of inferior, superior. These are two sides of the same coin. So when we feel inferior, sometimes we then project or look at other people as superior than us. And sometimes when we feel inferior, we play the superior role because we don't want to feel that way. And how that programming looks for, everyone is slightly different. But in this podcast, I just want to recognize the fact that, I'm not there. I'm not at a place of being there, but there still are levels of consciousness that exist. This is something that Rachel is always teaching about. There's no such thing as inferior, superior, but there is such thing as levels and grades. And the way she speaks about it and teaches is like a second grader is not the same as a high schooler or a college graduate, but they are all equal. Everyone is a human being. We're all equal, but we are at different grades. So what is it like as somebody on this path to spend time with people at the different grades? And that's what we're talking about here today. So it's not to say anyone at a lower level of consciousness than us is inferior, and anyone, and this happens to me a lot, at a higher level of consciousness is superior. We're not saying that. But what happens when we spend time at those different levels around people? And, we have to mention here the spiritual ego, because this comes out a lot when we're unconscious walking this path. We start to grow, and Ellie and I have done podcasts on this before. We've seen it within ourselves. We've seen it in others. We've seen it with clients that have come through in our programs and the university, where we start to gain a little bit of wisdom, or we start to go up in our level of consciousness, and all of a sudden we're the spiritual guru. We're the master. And then that's where this program of inferiority, superiority can play out. And so as we're moving through this, this podcast and having this discussion, just we're aware of that nature. Be aware of it within yourself. Notice if you're falling into that, because we're not talking about that today. We're not talking, we're not trying to come from those energies of saying, oh, well, this person's beneath me, but we are at different grades. So let's start with what it's like to spend time with somebody at a lower level of consciousness than maybe where you're at. Now, this is a scale. It's not, oh, well, they're high and low. Like, where I'm at is where I'm at. And if I spend time with somebody that's maybe not at the same level, a few things can happen. So let's start to unpack what that's like. And what I've noticed is, and this has been true throughout my whole life, is whenever I start to share something a little deeper, I often find I'm met with like this, it's pushed away, it's completely disregarded, it's disengaged. And I really want to go a little deeper into what it is I'm feeling, what I'm experiencing. I'm often met with this like, nope, don't have time for that, or it's just completely, it like goes over people's heads. And for the longest time, I just took it so personally. I took it like there was something wrong with me, or people didn't want to hear what it was that I was talking about or sharing about. And maybe that is the case. But what I'm starting to realize is, as we are kind of like going into more of like a higher level of consciousness, where we're more transitioning through like this fourth dimension, getting in towards like the fifth dimension, where we're really feeling and we're in our heart, the people that have completely shut all of that down. Now, generally speaking, this is going to be a lot more men. This is how we're conditioned to be, is very closed off. But this could be anyone, of course. The more that somebody can't energetically go into themselves, they can't show up for those conversations. And as somebody who has always had a deep capacity to feel, at least from my own self of what I've experienced in life, again, that's on a scale, right? But when I would start to have these conversations about deeper feelings, or, you know, deeper thoughts about life, people generally just can't go there. And thank God for this community in MSU, and then having this work to understand why that's happening and feel into the energies of, okay, I'm sharing this thing with this person and they can't show up in the place, you know, the way of presence right now for what it is I'm sharing. And the old me would just take that personally, like, oh, there's something wrong with me. And then that's, now I'm going down in my level of consciousness, right? I'm starting to be vulnerable and share, and now I'm, you know, I'm dragging myself down. And what I'm seeing is like, I'll dip into having maybe a conversation with somebody, and there's a lot here that we can, you know, dive into, Ellie, so we can, you know, pick the course. But I'll start to then entrain to that lower energy of like whatever is being reflected back to me, or whether it's me then feeling inferior, and then I'm you know, now running my own programming, and I'm there too.
Yeah, I mean, beautifully said. There's a massive amount of dismissal. There is a massive amount. It's like almost like when you start to go a little bit deeper with someone that is at a lower level of consciousness, and you're right on the money of like, we need to heal if we think that we're better than them, because we're not. It's simply different grades, and that's all. That's all there is. And for me personally, you know, this is a stage that we all move through, right? This is what I hear across the board every time I post social media videos. And it's like, my family doesn't get me, like my friends don't understand me. I feel so alone. I feel so isolated, and all of those things. It's very much the phrase par for the course. Is it, I use it right? Because I've always wanted to use that. I think that's what it is. It's a level that you have to move through, and you will learn and gain a lot of wisdom in that level. But for me, it was this, my friends wouldn't allow me to go there. And so I had to also move through like rejection, something's wrong with me, you know, like why am I always different, like all this victim stuff. And then you elevate out of it, and then you start having conversation with people at lower levels of consciousness. And I got to this point where if I feel compelled to share anything, I will. And if they block me, again, it's not personal, right? They just can't go there. It's like this, right? Someone's talking about Brazil, but you've only been to Brazil and they've never been to Brazil. So they can't talk to you about the things that you've experienced in Brazil and the language and all of these things, because they've never been to Brazil, right? That's the different grades, that's the different dimensions that we're in. And so I've learned, when I am interacting with people that are lower levels of consciousness, and there is this dismissal and there is this whatever it is, I've learned to just quickly go into, okay, did that just trigger me? Right? What did that bring up in me? And I'm getting to a place where it doesn't trigger me at all. Like I'm just completely in surrender to everything that it is. But I know that there's a lot of people out there who still are struggling with those interactions and those conversations. And so we have to get really good at detecting what gets triggered in me when someone at a lower level of consciousness doesn't want to hear what we're saying, doesn't listen. I've seen it in real time with Danny, especially with men. Like I'm a woman. So women emotionally can go much deeper than men, right? And so a lot of my girlfriends, even if they're not at higher levels of consciousness, they can still tap into that. So it's not as much of a struggle with me as I've seen it in real time with Danny talking to one of his guy friends. and they'll literally walk away when he's in the middle of a sentence because it's something that it's not registering it at all, so they're disinterested. And why would they go to any kind of depth when they're comfortable at where they're at? Which is a very for you, I've seen you move through a lot of stuff with that, and now I've seen you definitely elevate out of it, but it's something that we all go through.
Yeah, it's a constant reminder. And this is why I've been drawn to have so many friendships with women, because on an emotional level, they can go there. Generally speaking, this is generally speaking, of course, many guy friends that can go there. And it's beautiful. And condition wise, like conditioning, we have been brainwashed as men to disconnect from the felt sense of reality. We have learned to master and stay in the mind. And like that's not a great place to live from. You being severed from your own feeling. Rachel's actually done podcasts on this, that feeling is your superpower. Like, if I believe the podcast is called, if you want to look it up, A Human Being is a Feeling Being. And you can go back, it was quite a while ago. She talks all about that to really like become the divinity that you are, you have to be able to feel. And all of the, the brainwashing, the collective programming, it specifically disconnects people from their ability to feel. I mean, that's what technology does as well. It's just pulling everyone's consciousness in to like distract from actually people being in their body and having a felt sense of reality. And it's so important that we feel. It's like, it's our human nature. And when we don't feel, that's what leads to like literally psychopaths. Like, that's how you become a psychopath. Not having the natural form of empathy and compassion that we should have as a human being. And how much of that we have, that depends on our own personal selves and some of it where we're at in our level of consciousness. But yeah, it's something that I've had to deal with a lot of internally, of like wanting to go deeper, wanting to share like my feelings, and I can just feel there is not a space for it. And generally speaking, yeah, it shows up in men, but this shows up across the board now in my life. And I see this, especially walking this path. And this work is the world to me. And then when I try and share that with people that aren't on this level, it's not received. And that's very challenging, because this world, like this work that I do, who I am is what it comes down to. Like, on the deepest level is my soul. That's what we all are. And then when I'm trying to share that with people and it's not received, that's what it still triggers different aspects of my wounding. And this dates back from childhood. This dates back from, having emotionally unavailable parents at times. Not having a lot of people around to share my stuff with, my life with, and spending a lot of time in isolation alone. And having all of this like deep, rich internal life, but not knowing, what to do with it. And it can be a very lonely path, like as you're starting to raise your level of consciousness. And one thing that happens is you start to share, and then people lump you into, oh, you're spiritual, woo-woo, you're crazy. And I get why that happens, because that's a real thing. There are some people out there that have started to go down this path and opened up to things, and they aren't embodied, they're not integrated, they're not within themselves, and they live in this spiritual woo-woo land. Like, that's too far in the wrong direction, right? And the beauty comes from when we're in balance, when we're embodied within ourselves, we're able to tap into these deeper parts of us without getting lost in the in the ether. But that means obviously like sharing it with what we might call somebody as like a third dimensional person. It's just not going to be received. You're either going to get completely like disregarded, or someone's going to completely disengage or disconnect from you physically, even I've seen, or they're going to project on you and they're going to judge you, which is never fun to say the least.
Yeah, and that's a good segue into than being in conversation and communing with people that are more of at a higher level of consciousness than those lower levels of consciousness. So a perfect example and a story that I could tell is, I had a close friend of mine was on the path, someone that's working on themselves. And there is a difference between working on yourself and evolution, right? And so this person I could tell was doing some work on themselves. And, obviously, if you're ever a student of Master Self University, you're just going to keep going high and high, right? You're going to be choosing to be on the up and up. And she and I got into a very, very heated conversation where something I said triggered this person a lot. And instead of taking the time to process what just got activated, the next thing I knew, I was getting daggers thrown at me, right? And this person started to say like intensely, very hurtful things to me, right? That really stabbed me right where, in the perfect place. And in that moment, I knew that I had a choice, right? I could throw daggers back, or I can take the time to really process and go into what this brought up in me. And so I took about 2 days to really process. Okay, she said all of these things to me, and I'm going to take the time to love everything that just got activated. And through the processing of what got triggered in me, I came to this beautiful realization that what she said, she didn't hurt me. Her words just activated the hurt that I was already existing within me. And I had the opportunity in that time to heal and love all of that into transcendence. And when I did, and I gave everything that I needed to myself, I never needed anything from her. I don't need an apology. I don't need I'm so sorry I said that. I shouldn't have said that. I didn't need anything because I took care of myself. She just beautifully came to just open that box inside of me that was so buried, right? And that showed me like my level of growth, and that showed me where I was at in my journey. And when I came back to the conversation, I said, hey, like all that stuff you said, it was perfect. It allowed me to go into all the things that it brought up, and like I loved myself through it. And like I just feel like I came out of that whole situation bigger and better. And her response to me was basically that because I triggered her, I should have more empathy for her. I should say that I'm sorry to her. I should do all of these things. And she wanted me to be what she wasn't being for herself. And so, even in that conversation, we're at different levels of consciousness, right? We're at different places in our evolution. And then, what that whole experience did was actually, it was the end of us, because we could no longer be what we've always been. And I'm at a place now where I'm not here to cater to anybody's wounded inner child. Like I'm at a place where I know that I have to do that for myself, and that person has to do that for themselves. And that's not to mistake. If I sat there and I said something really harmful and really hurtful, and I said things that were really evil and really dark, 100% take accountability and responsibility. Like, I'm so sorry. I should have never said that. That's what's 100%. But what I said wasn't harmful or wasn't hurtful. What I said, she took in, was filtered through her wounding, and she took it and it triggered her, right? And then she didn't show up for herself in the way that she should. And then she needed me to be this very coddling, I'm so sorry, apologetic. And it's like, no, right? And that to me too showed me, holy crap, you could think that you're walking into the same grade as somebody, but it's only through those experiences that you see and realize like, oh, even in this place, we're at different levels of consciousness, and I love you, but I'm not going down to where you are to appease you and to acquiesce you and to make you feel better, when I'm at another level of doing that for myself. And so that's just a story to let you guys know, like, there are levels to all of this. And that was a very eye-opening and expansive experience for me. And again, that's to preface, not to say I'm better than her because I'm higher. No, I just did for me what she should have done for herself. And this is what we all should be doing for ourselves when we get triggered into our stuff.
Right. And then we have a choice. What do we do? Right. So in this beautiful example that Ellie's sharing, right? She has a choice that, oh, I've been triggered. Do I take accountability for myself? Right. That's the first way of oneness, responsibility. Do I take accountability for what it is that I'm feeling, go in and do the work? And granted, she might not know fully how to do that. Right. But that's not on you. that's not your responsibility. That's theirs. That's the first way of on this is I own my stuff, and I, that's on you to own yours.
Yeah.
And go on.
And that's and here's another thing, right? So there's a difference, but you can show up real cold and be like, no, you need to love yourself, right? If there is no empathy and understanding in that conversation, the conversation I had was like telling this person, like, this is the process that I moved through when you said the things that you said, right? And then when she was expressing herself, I came from this place of like, I totally understand where you're coming from, and I get it, and I understand it. But I'm still not going to sit here and give you what you want. I'm not going to give you the I'm sorry's, but I'm so willing to listen to you, and I'm so willing to be in presence with you, right? So I want you guys to understand, don't let the pendulum swing for you to all of a sudden be like a cold-hearted person. Like, no, there's empathy in there, but also don't bow down to what they need from you when they're not giving it to themselves.
Right. And it all depends the energy that we're coming from, right? And how do we know that? Well, we have to take accountability for what it is that, is coming up for us. Am I coming from this energy of, oh, I need you to say sorry? Well, that's not love. Like, that's not coming from your divinity. That's not your power. And so just to give it like a basic framework of understanding, you've got like the third dimension, the 3D. We're just gonna, you don't have to hold on to these names, these, this idea. But for those that kind of follow this, we've got the 3D, which is like just physical reality, very physical, nothing really beyond that. And then we've got where we're heading to, which is the fifth dimension. If you want to get there, learn the ways of oneness. All those are in the fifth dimension. Way of responsibility, way of unconditional love, way of harmony, vibrational frequencies that we're going to get to, right, as we move through this ascension process. And then in between, we have the fourth. So the fourth is where we're starting to realize, oh, there's more that's going on here than just this third dimensions of reality, this physical thing. And there's actually, and this is, there's quantum science, there's quantum energy going on here, which is beyond the like atomic level that we're not aware of, right? And this is what scientists are starting to become aware of, right? And when we really get to a higher vibration, we're getting into that fifth dimension where everything is in harmony and in love. But to get to those, from the third to the fifth is like, I can happily say this is where I'm at in the fourth. But within the fourth, there are many levels to that. And I think I've heard Rachel say there's maybe like 12 levels. So you can have somebody, and this has been my experience, you can have somebody who is doing the work, is starting to evolve, but they might not be doing the level of work that maybe you're doing and you're at, and they might not be aware of where they're still in the third or a lower level of consciousness, in that place of complete separation and needing things, and love is attachment and all that kind of thing. And whenever and this is the beautiful thing, whenever I spend time with somebody at a lower level of consciousness, normally what happens is a part of me will come out that's still vibrating at that frequency. So if we think about things on like this, like energetic kind of like levels, if I'm somewhere in the fourth and I go down to a lower level fourth or a third dimension, it's just showing things that are still in me that are at that frequency. And then it's my choice again, what do I want to do with them? Do I want to ignore them, or am I working towards being in the fifth? Which means I've got to start with, okay, what's the first thing I need to do? Take accountability and responsibility. And this is what Ellie's speaking of, is when we're really walking this path of moving through these like dimensional realities, getting up to the fifth dimension where we're all going. You listen to this podcast, you're going there, I guarantee. Keep doing the work, we're going there. Rachel's leading the way, we're off. But we've got to become the first way of oneness. We've got to just become responsible. And then on the flip side, if we're sharing something that exists within this higher frequency, they can't see it. They don't get it. And this example that you're sharing, Ellie, is like, you're probably explaining this to her, like, hey, I'm not apologizing for something that I didn't do wrong. But that exists in a higher vibrational frequency, what you're speaking of, that wisdom. And if they're not ready to go there, they can't see that because they're not there yet. And then that's what I said, it's their choice. Does that person then, or do we project Or do we disengage, or do we take accountability and start to work through, well, what did this bring up in me? What is this situation and this person reflecting back to me? And it's always, I've found it's equally beautiful to spend time with people at a lower level of consciousness so that you can see what you still need to work on, as well as, and we'll get to this in just a second, what it's like to spend time with somebody who's of a higher level of consciousness.
Yeah, and you guys got to remember that when they project on you, you will be the villain in their story. You will be the bad guy because they can't see from where you're seeing, right? They haven't moved through in the way that you've moved through it. And if that triggers you, you got to go into that, but you got to be okay with being the villain in their story. Like, I know in this person, I'm the bad one, right? I'm the one that's cold. I'm the one in all of these things. And I'm okay with that. Like, I surrender to that. That's just what it is. But I got to keep going. I got places to go, things to become. And so, yeah, just wanted to share that last part.
Yeah, it's a beautiful share. And something that I often find is like the part of me, this is constantly that thinks I know the best. This is something that often comes up as like, oh, well, I know,
Yeah.
I know the ways of oneness, right? Which are extremely like high, right?
Yeah.
But then that part of me that still feels inferior and wants validation for that, and so it's showing up as superior, like thinks that, oh, well, this is the best. This is what, well, this person should be doing whatever they want to do. Who am I to project what it is that they should be learning or not learning, right?
Yeah.
That's nothing to do with me, but that part of me comes alive and even tries attaching onto, the beautiful teachings that Rachel's here to offer. And then if you was to go into those teachings, exactly what I'm doing is not that, right? And this happens a lot whenever I'm talking to people who are like deeply on the yoga path, of like, following the yoga gurus and all that kind of stuff. And that's something that I've, dived into for a number of years. And there's a part of me that I felt come out recently. I was having a conversation with somebody, and I was like, I can't believe that they're not as interested in, what it is that I'm learning, got to share. And then I realized in reflection, I was like, Danny, how much time did you spend actually going into what they want, what they're learning and they want to share? I'm like, oh, damn. So I'm doing the same thing that I want them to do. Like, how crazy is that? That I'm wanting them to be interested in this, what I believe is these, or feel is these amazing teachings, but I'm not even open and interested to what they're learning just because I think or feel that it's at a lower level. Like, who's at the lower level here, Danny? And so it's something that I constantly have to check in with myself, because in those moments, I'm not the way of presence. I'm not open to receive. I'm not listening to them. I just want to share with them what I know. And that's like, Danny, come back to yourself.
Yeah. Beautifully said. Now we can move into what it's like hanging around with people of higher levels of consciousness. Because while it is dope as hell, and while it is incredible, be ready to see some shit inside of you, because holy crap. We have the honor and the privilege of spending time with people who are at higher levels of consciousness. And it is only when I am in their presence that I see a lot of ugly stuff running in me. And it triggers the shit out of me to be able to see things that I usually don't see when I'm around people at, my level of consciousness or lower. I don't get to see that, right? And it's only when you're in the presence of someone that is so high, that is everything that we all are, when you will see the nasty and the icky and the gunky. And there have been many times where I'll come home from a hangout and I will just sit with myself and I'm like, oh my God, I am so triggered by the fact that I run that program. And I'm so triggered by the fact that I show up like that in the world, or I show up like that in conversation. You will see everything. And when you're very low in your level of consciousness, you will not go into and reflect what this being just showed you. You will project, you will blame them, you'll call them, oh, they're such a bitch and he's a fucking asshole and and I hate hanging out with them. And that's when you know you're very low. And for me, I come home and I sit there and I go, oh my God, I just saw some things. And now I have to sit with everything that it just brought up in me. And it's perfect and it's beautiful. And it is also a very jarring experience.
There's nothing better than being with somebody that's extremely high in their level of consciousness, and somebody walking in and you show up to them, it's like in a certain way, and you have a narrative that you don't realize is running in your mind because they're acting out their unconscious programs, and you maybe fall into a little bit of judgment or whatever it is that you got going on, and you feel yourself wanting to show up in one way, and then you see them show up entirely different, and you're like, wow, look what's in me. This isn't loving at all. Look how quickly I snapped into being this version of myself, which I do not want to be, because I feel how much, lack of love and how harmful it is to be in that way. I don't want to be that way. And there's so much like unconscious education that happens when you just spend time with somebody like that.
Yeah.
To just when you're aware of what it is that you're like feeling and looking for, when you're aware of like just the subtle energy shifts and the nuances, and be like, oh, this is what it feels like to respond not from a place of being triggered when someone does that, or like when someone like blatantly is disrespectful or does something that maybe you would lose your shit on, that they just are either extremely calm or vice versa. Like, this is another thing. Like, somewhere, this is something that I struggle with a lot. When intensity arrives, right? And by the way, whatever you think an enlightened being is, if you've, followed the spiritual gurus of the East, throw that out the fucking window.
Yeah.
Because that ain't it. And that's not what this work is about. This work is about being a real human being. And that means not being levitating, peaceful person all the time. And I've had many experiences where like we've had business meetings with people where like somebody has been extremely disrespectful and maybe is being kind of excommunicated out of the organization for whatever reasons. And I'm like, my whole nervous system is shaking and I want to get all small and contracted. And I just see somebody like, show up in their divinity and their power and kind of like set the energy straight and call out what needs to be called out. And it's just, and that brings up a little like, wow, I've got a long way to go and I've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, it's extremely humbling.
Humbling.
It will take you down to zero real quick and humble your ass real quick, which honestly, I love being humbled because it just allows me to keep learning and growing. And I'm so grateful for it. And I'd love to share this story. So one of the very highly elevated conscious beings that me and Danny get to hang out with is obviously Rachel Fiori, right? And recently, Rachel and I and Rachel's husband, and we all go to this dog training seminar every like other Sunday. And this particular past Sunday, we were listening to everybody going around the circle, right? And sharing about their dog problems, and the trainer would go and like give them advice. And this particular day right now in San Diego, it's cold, right? I mean, listen, I'm from the East Coast. This ain't cold, but it's pretty chilly. And while we were all sitting in the circle, people were talking so much. Okay. Like we were literally like an hour and a half of people sharing, and they just kept sharing and they just kept sharing and just kept sharing. And I'm freezing. And finally, we get to like the second to last person. This woman gets up, and all she has to do is share about whatever her dog's issues are, right? But she decided to start from ground zero, right? And she started to give a bio of herself, a bio of the dog, a bio of the rescue group. And then she started going down to all of his behaviors. I mean, this woman was talking forever, right? And I found myself, these are the behavioral first of all, the mental programs that we're running were like, can you please shut up? Right? It's so cold. Like, you keep talking. Like, why are you talking so much? Like, you clearly don't know the rules. And I was running all these mental programs. The emotional programs that got erupted in me were like, I was super annoyed. I was frustrated. I was pissy. I was showing up really ugly. And then my behavioral program was that I turned away from this woman. And I was doing to myself, like, eye rolling, like, oh my God, come on. Like, it's so cold. We've been here forever. Right. And while I'm running all of these programs unconsciously, I look over at Rachel, and she is sitting there in just complete presence with this woman. And I could tell Rachel was freezing too. We had been there for so long. Complete presence. Every time the woman would say something, she would like nod her head. She would smile. She would like make a comment. And seeing the way that she was showing up completely in the way of presence shined such a light at the way that I was showing up and all the programs that I was running. And when I got home that day, I sat with myself and I just reflected. And I could feel all these programs coming up of wanting to shit on myself and shame myself and judge myself. Like, what's wrong with you, Ellie? Like, that woman did nothing wrong, blah, blah, blah. And as all of that was happening and I was allowing everything to come up, it was such a beautiful experience to get to see all of that ugly and all of those programs running and in the presence of someone that is the way of presence. It was a phenomenal experience and I was so grateful for it. And that has allowed me also to see how much unconsciously I run programs, how impatient I can be, and all of these things. And that's the gift, right, of being around a highly elevated being, because it allows you to see what you wouldn't see if you were just vibrating with people, that were lower. You can also take that experience and then project and then blame and then never hang out with that person. And gladly for me, like, I take the first route, which is I'm so grateful for it. But that's just a story to share with you. This is what happens when you're around people that have higher consciousness.
Yeah, and it's not to say, I'm sure in that moment she had a preference. Sure,
Yeah.
she would have preferred to just get along with the
Yeah.
dog training. Like, let's just get on with it. Let's go, right? This is what I've learned from it. As we go higher and higher, you still have a preference. You still will be like, well, I would prefer to not drive this car, which is, falling to pieces and
Yeah.
not very comfortable. I would prefer, this car here that really suits my needs. I would prefer that. But I'm not like attached to it. And I don't judge the things that I
That's
don't
it.
prefer.
There
I
was
don't
no
look down
judgment.
on them. I don't look down on them. I don't judge them. I'm still at peace with what is happening. And that's really hard from a lower level of consciousness to wrap your head
Absolutely.
around, being like, how can I prefer something and not judge the other thing?
Right.
Like, how can I do that? And if that's you, if you're there, that's fine. Like, if you don't quite get that, just keep healing, keep elevating, because the more that you heal all of the parts of you that feel inferior, that lack the true vibrational frequency of equality, you'll start to understand that. And so that's how it works as well, is like, the more that we go into ourselves and we start to raise our own level of consciousness, then we can start to like shift the way, or not, we can, like, the way that we start to perceive the world shifts.
Yeah.
It's not that, Rachel's in that moment trying not to judge the person. No, she just is the way of equality. She's just
Yeah.
not
Right.
judging them. She's just not judging them. That program, that
Doesn't
energy
exist.
doesn't exist at that level of consciousness
Yes.
she's at. And obviously that becomes a huge mirror for anybody that, spends time with her or is friends with her, if they're, ready and willing to see it.
Yeah. So beautiful.
Yeah.
And so, for everyone that's on the path of raising your level of consciousness, of becoming, you're going to trigger the shit out of everybody that is lower. And you got to be armed and ready for what that's going to bring up in you as you do, because it's not going to be fun, right? But the difference is, are you going to allow that to take over you and ruin you and run you? Or are you going to be completely detached? Like, that's your stuff. It's got nothing to do with me.
And there are going to be people, as you continue on your journey, that don't see you. don't see this part of you that, and they never may bleh. They maybe never will.
Yeah.
They maybe will never see you in all of the light that you are, but the people that do see you, they're the ones that see the light in themselves. And that's what matters at the end of the day. And the question that I have to constantly come back to is, why do I care that this person can't see
Right.
me as this?
Yes.
Like, why does that matter to me? What is the attachment there within me? So if that's you, like, it may happen. You know, you may start to like walk this path and you're starting to share with other people, and they can't take it, they don't get it, they disengage from it. That's normal. To keep doing the work, and as you keep, you know, elevating, you maybe start to connect with different souls. And there may be a period where you have to kind of be isolated and on your own, and all your friends will go away and your family won't understand what it is that you're doing, and you have to walk the path. But that's all part of it.
Yep. So to all you listeners out there, we are a metaphysical university now. If you are ready to gain and learn and integrate higher spiritual education, we are enrolling right now. Our first semester starts January 21st, 2025. If you want to learn more, schedule a free student enrollment meeting with us at masterselfuniversity.com and come and learn what the school year is going to look like, the classes that we offer, the semesters, the breakdown, the tuition, everything. Me and Danny will be in class starting January 21st, 2025. And we would love, love, love to see you guys all there, because the time is now for us to really start elevating, raising our level of consciousness, and building the new earth. So please subscribe, comment, share, and we will catch you guys on the flip side. Bye.
Bye.